What the bloody hell is going on with free speech in the Western world? I'm Kate Fentanyl, Lady Liberty Australia, and I'm back to talk about what's happening in my home state of Western Australia at the moment. It's been going around in the news, including here in the United States. I'll just bring it up again in case you missed my last video ranting about this. But in Western Australia last week, we had so-called sovereign citizens raided by the Western Australian Police and more than 100 guns seized off of around 40 people. So how did we get here? These people have not been convicted of any crimes. They have been dobbed in by a mate, reported to the police, who put a call out saying, if you know anyone who professes what we loosely describe as a sovereign citizen, not defined in law. I went through an AFP PowerPoint presentation and they specifically said that these people are not typically violent. Yet these people have had their homes raided without a warrant, no knock raids. And the police, by the way, have the ability to come into any licensed firearm owner's house in Australia at any time without a warrant, under the powers to ensure you are storing your firearms safely. Yes, we have to store them in a safe with the magazine and the ammunition separate. We can't use them for castle law. There is a debate about that now, but they're only talking about putting pepper spray on the table. And as someone who's been in situations, and I know the effectiveness of pepper spray, I would much prefer to have the ability to defend myself with any means necessary. But we do not have that right acknowledged in law in Australia, nor do we have the right to free speech, the First Amendment, as it is known here in the land of the free and home of the brave. There are implied freedom of political expression and communication that we have granted along the way through the judiciary and challenging of things in the High Court. But this law on the books in my home state of Western Australia now has given the police the power to do this, to disarm someone based on your views, attitudes, and opinion. That is written in the law. Now, at the time when I was living in Perth, I was screaming about this. This to me was the biggest red flag I had ever seen on the horizon off of Cottesloe Beach. Because who gets to be the arbiter of what is an acceptable view, attitude, and opinion in Western Australia in 2025? Particularly when it hasn't even gone before a judge. But how would a judge rule in this day and age when we do not have the First Amendment? I did get the advice from the King's Counsel as part of my legal action campaign about this, and he mentioned potential High Court challenge because there is an implied freedom of political expression in Australia, and this sovereign citizen thing, which is a political philosophy and a view, again, non-violent. I've met some of these people. You know, the Australia Act, and you can sell your birth certificate on the stock market, all that kind of talk. These are the people we are talking about here that haven't made any threats against the police from what we've been told. I'm sure that's the first thing they would say. Instead, they've come out and used the manhunt for Desi Friedman in Victoria going on the other side of the country to justify these raids on the people, we the people. And thank the Lord I am not in Western Australia, because you can be guaranteed my door would have been kicked in. You know, you might call me dramatic, but look at my flag behind me. Look at some of the memes, my spicy memes, which is now why my Facebook is shadow banned so much and I can't even bloody log on there. Enemy of the state here. So my views, attitudes, and opinions, because they're contrarian to the oligarchies and the police who run the state, I have a different view and a distrust of government, and healthy distrust of government, I would say. And they did say, the AFP, during the pandemic, there was an awakening of so-called sovereign citizens, or those who question the authority. I was taught it was healthy to question authority in a democracy, in a free country. Not anymore. It will cost you your guns. I do not know. I'm still waiting to hear. I am in touch with an individual, a woman who contacted me. She documented what happened on the raid. She sent me photos as well. I've replied to her, I'm waiting to hear back. She said she's not online much. I don't blame her. I hope she has bloody Starlink. So I'm waiting to hear back from her where she's at. But she claims that she's not a sovereign citizen, doesn't have Facebook. So where did this idea come from? So we will see. I'm watching it very closely. The other thing I will talk about today, I've got a few videos from the review that's going into these diabolical laws. So the Western Australian Parliament was forced to send these laws to a review committee thanks to the re-election of Nick Garan. I interviewed him in the lead up to the state election, and he promised that if he was re-elected, he would force the government if he got the numbers, and he did. Thanks to our fair weather friends in the Greens who supported it to get it across the line. That review is ongoing. They have held their hearings. I have watched nearly all of them because I'm a masochist. But it's important to know what people are saying, the administrators of the law, the police, and they're the ones. I'll show some more videos today. I have watched the testimonies from our approved shooting organisations. The government was very clear to me that because I am not an approved representative organisation by them, as Professor Augusto Zimmerman says, Western Australia is an oligarchy. I'm not an approved person to sit at the table to have these discussions despite my 30,000 votes at the Senate election, my 30,000 whatever it is followers now, and all the people who have supported me during my legal action campaign when I was the only one who said, let's get the bloody advice and see what we're dealing with here, boys. And this was one of the big ones, of course, that I was screaming about. So the review is ongoing. I've got some videos from the police. Cole Blanche, of course, who was the one in the news last week saying we had to disarm these people. They are a public safety threat because of their views. I repeat again, not because there were any threats or because they were convicted of a crime, because of their views. So let's have a listen. These clips are in relation to the ability now for the cops to deny you a firearms license or take away your guns if you've been convicted of a disqualifying offence. And now they've lowered the level of what that is, very different to how it was in the old Act. Specifically, any crime that carries a 5-year jail sentence. So you don't have to be convicted and do that time. It just comes with the penalty. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to mansplain to the lawyers here what this means, but just so people understand. They have given the police more powers now to rule over those who have been convicted of a higher number of crimes than previously. And they're talking about the justice system and how this plays into it. And just to hint, there's no justice in this. So let's have a listen.
Questions on disqualifying offences, which prohibit people from obtaining firearms licences, and I'm keen to get an understanding of whether any of these have been problematic so far. So I suppose which disqualifying offences have discretionary power, if any? How does that sort of work in practice? Has it caused any issues? And I suppose the flip side to that is that a number of these disqualifying offences obviously to enhance public safety, and I wonder if you could give us some background on how those disqualifying offences may be linked to firearms use in the past and how important they are in the public safety considerations.
Did you want to answer the discretionary ones?
Yeah, so I'll answer point one, thank you. So there is no discretion what a disqualifying offence or order or being a member of an organisation. If that's a decision, that's it, there's no discretion. So if you say committed a stealing, we can't go, okay, no, that one's fine. You're done, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the definition of disqualifying offence in the Act, which I think is a serious crime.
Yeah, serious offence under the Criminal Investigation Act.
Yeah. So it's defined by law as a serious crime. If that serious offence is listed in the CIA, then it is a disqualifying offence and the Commissioner's discretion disappears.
Yeah. And how has that sort of changed from the previous Act, and how is that important for public safety?
So under the previous Act, that you would then use a fit and proper test, and there were examples where we would have someone convicted of an offence that we thought was serious enough to warrant the cancellation of a licence. it would then go to the SAT, of course, because it's a decision by the Commissioner, and the SAT could overrule that decision, and in a lot of cases did. So I think government took a view that take that discretion away, it doesn't become a decision of the Commissioner, it becomes a fact of law. So,
And so if people wanted to...
So did you hear that? There is no mechanism to challenge this. Once you've done it, you're done, as that young cop said. This is what we are talking about now. People who have done the time for their crime, rehabilitated, and got swept up in this new expansion of what a serious crime is now, and Misuse of Drugs Act, that's in there too. Maybe we should have a whole other discussion about the war on drugs, but I'm sure my mate, comrade Dr. Brian Walker is fighting the good fight in Parliament, trying to convince these people that this is just overreach now. I mean, what else can you call it? And the fact that this is the law, they wrote it into the law, so there is no appeal mechanism, and so that they have the power to deny you and you have no right of reply. This is justice now in Western Australia 2025.
People wanted to argue that their serious offence wasn't related to owning a firearm. What is the connection between serious crime, even if it didn't involve a
This is the
firearm,
chair of the Committee
and
of Labour.
the right
Feminist.
and responsibilities that then go with firearm ownership?
I think the principle behind the disqualifying offences is that good decision making is critical. What we do know from some of those previous SAT decisions under the 1973 Act, we have heard things previously like, well, the threat had nothing to do with firearms and it was a different situation, so that you can have your firearms back. I think the government looked at that, got its feedback from the community, again, particularly family violence victims, and said it's actually about decision making and bad decision making that has resulted in you committing an offence. It doesn't have to be specifically related to the use of the firearm, but maybe you're a person who can't make good decisions based on your criminal history. Therefore, we don't have the confidence that you are a fit and proper person to own a firearm. I think that's where the government have landed on this occasion. We would support that as police. I think we want our very best people in WA who have no criminal histories to be out there using firearms and making the community feel safer. I know that's a divisive conversation, but the line was drawn on those mandatory disqualification offences, and we will implement the law as such.
The line was drawn. I don't want to speak to my learned colleagues in the justice system, but this makes me extremely uncomfortable. Watching the police, the authorities, the enforcers, the regulator who had a very heavy hand in writing these laws, we all know that now. I mean, they might as well pissed on the Law Reform Commission Project 105 report for how much they used that as part of this. No wonder I can still hear Professor Augusto Zimmerman screaming, rightly so, and I'm still screaming about this. We are talking about the police having the power to dictate what the justice system can do if someone wants to appeal a decision about their firearms licence. And because it's not a right, and we don't have the right to defend ourselves, we certainly do not have the right to hunt unless we are an Indigenous person as part of the new body corporates. If you've watched my last video talking about who has the right to hunt and who doesn't in Australia, it's not us, me, the majority of my community. Two-tiered society in what rights you get. But now we do not even have the right to justice in Western Australia to appeal some of these decisions for crimes not even related to the use of a firearm. It has gone too far. It is a police state. I have another video about this stuff too.
Reform.
I can go down
Sorry.
to that
You go,
one.
mate.
Yes, in the Law Reform Commission report, it was recommended that there be an informal appeal mechanism to the Commissioner on licensing matters. Was this considered?
I would say day by day, people ring the firearms and the transition team, who are obviously involved, many of my delegates
If
who
you
can
can
make
get through.
decisions. I think that happens every day. This is an informal mechanism. That's the entire purpose of the Licensing Enforcement Division, where you can ring up and say, this is my situation. And we obviously have, under the Commissioner's discretion, an ability to change certain elements around the ownership of a firearm. And we've already spoken about a few of those. And it may be on a case-by-case basis. I think this is where a lot of the lack of understanding of different situations creates confusion for many, because person A might have a very different situation than person B, and they will say, this happened to me, so it should happen to everyone else. But there are certain circumstances, and that's really the daily business post this transition of the Licensing Enforcement Division and the team, to be a place where they can come and say, this is my situation, how can I work within the laws and your discretion, Commissioner?
Right.
And if they don't like the decision, there's always the State Administrative Tribunal to dispute it, where I have the discretion to make a decision.
In some cases, not with your disqualifying offences. But there you have it. That's where we are at now in Western Australia, and what we are dealing with when it comes to the authorities who are enforcing these laws. Just to go back again, the sovereign citizens, because of their views, attitudes and opinions, have been disarmed. It's interesting, why don't we mention the number of people communist regimes have killed, but there are still plenty of commies running around Western Australia specifically, but they're allowed to have firearms because that's a view that's acceptable in Australia in 2025. It is scary times, and it is because we do not have our rights to free speech acknowledged by our government there. It is not a free society, and you cannot say that it is anymore. And of course, I have to be the one to go into bat for the sovereign citizens. I know there are people from over east in Australia clutching their pearls. How could this happen? I told you I was there on the ground trying to fight this, and I'm still trying to fight it. I will let you know when, hopefully, I hear back from this individual affected. And please just look after each other. Anything I can do to help, please let me know. I may be in San Antonio, Texas, but my heart is very, very much still in Western Australia. I'll be back with some more videos from these bloody hearings again soon. Have a good evening, g'day, good night.